Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Shireen Malik-Gavzali, she, her pronouns, County of San Mateo Chief Equity Officer. Tonight, we're delighted to bring you an Equity Through Art series, a conversation on the Nairobi Movement in East Palo Alto with members of the Nairobi Movement and the East Palo Alto Community Archive. Today, you'll hear from a great set of folks, Frank J. Omawali Satterwhite, Kalamu Shashay, Juanita Croft, Louis Dixon, Martha Hanks, Wulindlela Wobogo, and Sharifa Wilson. By way of background, the Equity Through Art series is a partnership between the County Library, Health's BHRS, Office of Diversity and Equity, and myself, the Chief Equity Officer at the County Manager's Office. My new position as Chief Equity Officer was put in place May of last year with the intention of supporting the county to strengthen our path towards equity and inclusion. Moving from intention to outcomes will require us to chart a path towards equity that's based on our understanding of the path that got us to where we are here today. What got us to a place of such inequitable outcomes? The history and experiences of the people who's experienced those inequities is important to hear. We have to understand our path to now in order to chart our path forward. The Equity Through Art series shares experiences and histories of Black, Indigenous people of color here in San Mateo County. Our county is 64% people of color, but the narrative for San Mateo County isn't one of the stories of people of color. In one of the first webinars we had, Seeing Silicon Valley, the author spoke about traveling across the nation and internationally to share photos from their book, Seeing Silicon Valley, and just how surprised people were that Silicon Valley wasn't all white tech guys. If BIPOC communities are close to 2/3 of our population, we should hold that much of the narrative. That's how we'll feel like we belong. Our stories need to be told and shared through our own voices. And today, as part of the commemoration of Black History Month, I'm excited to have strong leaders here to share their voices about a pivotal period in local Black history, when East Palo Alto was a center for Black activism and a model for Afrocentric cultural movements in the United States. This is the Black history that children across the county should be aware of. Now, for the good stuff, the important content for tonight. Before I turn it over to the panelists, we'll first start with a brief 2.5-minute video. It's a slideshow really featuring photos from the East Palo Alto Nairobi Movement that are part of the East Palo Alto Community Archive series that you'll learn more about shortly. With that, let's turn it over to the slideshow.
Lift every voice and sing, earth, heaven, ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies resound the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. March on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod to the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn has died, yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place from which our fathers died. We have come over tears have been watered. We have come, treading our path through the blood of the slaughter, out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last.
Wonderful. Thank you to the East Palo Alto Community Archives for those beautiful photos. I'd like to turn it over at this point to Sharifa Wilson to do an opening on the archival project and introduce our moderator for the panel. Sharifa, who's worn many, many hats, including East Palo Alto City Council member, mayor, school board member, sheriff, and now the co-manager of the East Palo Alto Community Archives, along with Omawale Satterwhite, who you'll hear from during the panel. Thank you, Sharifa, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. First, let me start by thanking you and the San Mateo County Library Equity Through Art project for allowing me time to share a little bit about this exciting project, the East Palo Alto Community Archive. East Palo Alto is an inclusive, welcoming, connected, multilingual, multicultural community where residents learn about the past and collectively reimagine the future of the city. East Palo Alto is one of the newest cities in San Mateo County. We became a city in 1983. However, the community of East Palo Alto has been around since the Ohlone era in the 1700s. We have rich, proud history. The East Palo Alto Community Archive Project started 2 years ago out of a concern by the community about all the changes happening in the city. Many of the community wanted to be sure that those who had helped create and grow the community would not be forgotten. We surveyed the community, we held focus groups and town hall meetings, and found overwhelming support for the idea of creating a way to preserve our history. The mission of the East Palo Alto Community Archive is to collect, share, promote, celebrate, and preserve the unique history of East Palo Alto community for future generations. For the past year, we have been concentrating on developing a digital archive. We have been recording oral histories from individuals who are willing to share their experiences growing up, living, or working in the community. We are hearing from current and former residents, and we welcome all to be part of this project. It is very important that this archive reflect the people of East Palo Alto, and we have a diverse group of residents working with us to connect us with the community. We are committed to making the archive as inclusive and diverse as our city is. We are working to ensure that this archive lives into the future, and we're hoping that you will join us in this effort. If you're willing to share some of your experiences, your pictures, your memorabilia, please contact us at epaarchive@gmail.com. Thank you. This evening, you will hear about the Nairobi Movement in East Palo Alto. This is just one example of the many stories that will be included in our collections. We think that you will find it both informative and inspiring. I'm going to turn it over now to Martha Hanks. Martha Hanks has been a long-term resident of East Palo Alto. She's actually lived in the city for 64 years. She's a retired educator. She served as a teacher and a principal at Nairobi Day School and Nairobi High School from 1970 to 1978. Martha continues to be very, very active in the community. She's a member of many groups, including ones at her church, St. Francis of Assisi. Martha will be moderating the panel this evening. Now I'll turn it over to Martha. Welcome.
I would like to, first I'm going to introduce the panelists and then we're going to ask them some questions. So Kalama Shashay has been a resident resident of the East Palo Alto community for nearly 56 years. She has worked with Nairobi College, Kalamu Productions, Probe Community Development Center, Shule Ya Taifa, the Girls Club of the Mid-Peninsula, and other leading community-based youth-serving and arts-focused organizations during her involvement in the Nairobi Movement. Our next panelist is Juanita Croft. Juanita Croft is a 67-year resident of the Bellhaven neighborhood in Menlo Park, one of the adjacent communities of color, who was first a student, then later a teacher at Nairobi College, who took her lived experiences in the Nairobi Movement to Foothill College and then back to her communities. Our next panelist is Reverend Mr. Lewis Dixon, a 58-year resident of East Palo Alto and has been an ordained deacon at St. Francis of Assisi Catholic Church for 32 years. He is also active in numerous organizations in East Palo Alto. Dr. Frank Omawale Satterwhite is a 50-year resident of East Palo Alto who worked with Nairobi College, the Ravenswood City School District, the Community Development Institute, and other organizations during the Nairobi Movement. He currently serves as president of Leadership Incorporated, a progressive nonprofit management consulting firm located in East Palo Alto. Budenlela Iyojola Wabogo was born on August 22nd, 1938 in Oakland, California. His formal education is in science and engineering. He's a longtime activist in African American and the Nairobi movements. Budenlela also is a jazz pianist with his vocalist wife in the Wabogo Jazz Ensemble. His publications are on African history and sports. He is an East Palo Alto resident with his wife, Nozipo, and his daughter, Ama. Okay. As a teacher at Nairobi Day School, we were really concerned about motivation and pride with our students. Our motto was, our children can learn. I'd like to ask the panelists, what does the Nairobi movement mean to you? And we're going to start with, go in this order, Shashay, Juanita, Lewis, Omawale, and Budenlela.
An artist's task. As an artist, I believe it is my task to respond to what people desperately need, but will seldom ask. For instance, I have words for the lonely and afraid, just like I have words for those who think they've got it made. And I have words for the strong and brave, just like I have words for those who don't know how to behave. I mean, there just ain't no ending to my responsibility in helping people in their lifetime be free. Happy Black History Month, y'all. I'm so happy to be a part of this panel of community activists. And thank you very much to the San Mateo County Library for this opportunity for me to speak about my experiences and involvement in the Nairobi movement that happened in East Palo Alto community in California. My involvement in the Nairobi movement began as a student at Nairobi College. I had completed my first year of attending a university in Oregon, and having decided not to return because of the isolation that I felt from being away from my family and community, I decided to enroll in Nairobi College, a 2-year Black community college that had been founded by Bob Hoover in 1969. It had been expected by my family, and I wanted to continue pursuing a college education. Realizing that I also at the same time had a great passion for the arts, I was excited that the college had a music program. So I became a member of the Nairobi Messengers, a performing arts group of students who told the story of African people through songs, theatrical skits, poetry, and other forms of artistic expression. We were encouraged to create original work to contribute to the body of work that we had been studying and performing. And our youth group was led by Joan Newby, who is now an ancestor, and our esteemed panelists with us today, Brother Bulanlela Wabogo. I became a vocalist, songwriter, and resident poet. The Nairobi Messengers served as ambassadors of Nairobi College. I earned an associate arts degree in liberal arts. For me, the Nairobi movement meant that it was a way of life to be cherished and practiced throughout my lifetime. It was a way to develop and utilize acquired skills that kept me on a path of purpose. The Nairobi movement gave me the space that I needed to thrive, and thrive I did, serving all at one time as a student, performing artist, English teacher, community tutor, assistant registrar, and a member of the board of directors. Upon graduating from Nairobi College, I still stayed connected while securing jobs in the business and nonprofit organization sectors in East Palo Alto and the North Barrows community in Redwood City. The Nairobi movement was and continues to be a way of life for me. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Like Shashay, I am pleased to be here this evening to share out my experiences with the Nairobi movement. For me, the movement is about self-determination, and specifically in education, because as an educator, a teacher, my beginnings were actually at Nairobi College. I started off as a student. Being there provided me with an understanding of my heritage, and I learned a lot more about the history of African Americans and the diaspora, which I had little or no background in when I arrived. Fortunately for me, I was able to become a TA under the mentorship of Mary Hoover, who was a graduate student, a doctoral student at Stanford at the time that we started. And I was able to teach basic skills using the method that she had developed for African-American students. With that, I was able to move on. I became a full-time teacher at Nairobi for the last few years, and I was there from 69 to 78 with one year exception, but was there for the whole time. And so I did take that experience with me to Foothill College and was able to influence or create things that were more meaningful for me as a teacher because I was able to apply it to what I had learned in the Nairobi movement.
My experience with the Nairobi movement, I had a brother who attended Nairobi College, and a lot of the young people who attended Nairobi day school and high school that I had close contact with, and they went on to graduate from college. And even before that, I worked with them as youth groups that I worked with the girls and the boys, and we worked together, and they inspired me to keep on working like I'm working today with the Ravenswood High School Alumni Association, that we can continue to help the young people from East Palo Alto to continue to get their education. That's why we give scholarships each and every year, and so they can continue to grow, and to watch them come back and give to the community, even the ones who still live back east or in the south, they are still responding. They still have that connection, that Nairobi connection. And so It does my heart good. That's why I'm continuing to work till I can't work no more with the Nairobi connection.
Yeah, I came to California as a graduate student at Stanford, joined the BSU in 1967, and all BSU students were expected to make a contribution in East Palo Alto, which was the local Black community just across the freeway. And so at the time that I then came into East Palo Alto as a volunteer, I participated in and then coordinated the tutoring program for high school students at Ravenswood High School. And it was about that time that Nairobi College got founded by Bob Hoover, and a number of us joined that effort. And so over many years, I was on the faculty, I was on the board. I was, because I had a job that allowed me to travel a lot, I became an ambassador, a fundraiser. And Nairobi College was at the heart of everything that I did. I sensed at that time that there was one major area in East Palo Alto where we hadn't quite been as successful as the community wanted. And that was becoming a city rather than remaining an unincorporated area. And so once as I was working in and supporting Nairobi College, I then shifted in terms of my full-time work to being the deputy superintendent of the Ravenswood City School District. And after 4 years, left the school district and became the acting principal at Nairobi High School for a year. And it was at that point that I got energized to form a nonprofit organization called Community Development Institute, which housed the effort to incorporate the city of East Palo Alto. And after the incorporation was complete in 1983, we recognized that there was no youth participation in the incorporation organizing or effort. And so we created within the Community Development Institute a program called the Leadership Training Academy. And over a dozen years, we trained more than 1,000 East Palo Alto students on what it takes to build a city and to run a city and to speak with one's voice through one's own institutions. And that experience lives with me today. You're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was involved in several radical organizations nationwide. And one of the weaknesses of some of them was they didn't really have a program for community development. So East Palo Alto provided that for me, a place to root myself in something more than radical politics. And I was involved in various things here, and I'll elaborate that on number 2. But I actually settled here, and it was an expression of our ideas that you can't just protest and confront. You've got to build and set down roots. That's harder to do in the North than in the South. So we were doing something new, coming back to the community, and East Palo Alto represented that community for me.
Thank you all. Okay, one of the things that I experienced at Nairobi Day School, first of all, I'd like you to know that we had a very diverse staff of teachers. So, but one of the really great things about Nairobi Day School is that, well, Nairobi Day School and Nairobi High School, is that every morning, every single solitary morning, the whole school got together. We had a kindergarten class. So each day a different group would lead our assembly. We would sing the Black National Anthem, all 3 verses, every single solitary morning. So the kindergartners performed on a certain day, then the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade class performed. Our 4th, 5th, and 6th grade class performed. And then our high school students performed. And then on the 5th day, our staff performed. So we did poetry, we talked about Black history, we did what I mentioned, poetry, songs, just a lot of cultural development, so that all of us had much pride in ourselves and in our school. So what I'd like to do is ask the panelists to share a story about or 2 about your own experience in the Nairobi movement.
Well, keeping my passion for the arts alive and having experienced being a member of the Nairobi Messengers, I eventually became known as a poet who taught in a variety of schools and making appearances for community events, causes, and other activities in East Palo Alto, the Bellhaven community in Menlo Park, North Fair Oaks in Redwood City, the greater San Francisco Bay Area, and beyond. I'm the author of 3 books of poetry. I've been serving as the East Palo Alto Poet Laureate since 1983, the year when East Palo Alto became the 20th city to be incorporated in San Mateo County. After being with the Nairobi Messengers, I co-founded the Daughters of Light to join the Sons of Light, who selected me, Jeannie Cuffy Tatum, and Lakiba Pittman as members of the Nairobi Messengers to join them as vocalists for their self-produced recording, Let the Sunshine In. They had been active in East Palo Alto as a band before locating to Oakland, and then we became known as the Sons and Daughters of Light. Following the work with the band, I went on to record on 4 nationally released projects as producer, songwriter, vocalist with the Wobogo Jazz Ensemble from East Palo Alto. Again, Brother Bulanlela Wobogo served as my musical director and arranger on all of my songs for the National Black United Front on its own Undercurrent Records label. In 2016, I released one of my songs, Happy Kwanzaa to You, for a CD compilation produced by pianist Rudy Wangozi for his Rudy Wangozi Presents Kwanzaa Time, holiday songs for the culture on his Sanwa Records label. And we're hoping to get back together again to do another recording at some point in the future, as well as myself looking into producing more of my music and this time include poetry with my recording. Thank you.
Well, my experience with Nairobi College came out of some frustrations that I had with the educational system. And this was after I had been to UC Berkeley for a year and found that I was struggling with writing skills. And so it had been a struggle for me. And so when I came to Nairobi, I was hoping to overcome the problem, maybe by approaching it differently than it had been in the schools I was attending. So as I mentioned, I was fortunate enough to become a student, and I took Mary Hoover's class and found the reason why I was struggling with writing. And so she gave me a book from a teacher at Foothill College, interestingly enough, that helped me figure out what the challenge was. And then I was able to improve my writing skills. I learned from Mary about an approach for teaching reading and writing, and studied under her the particular method that she was using. And there were other experiences that I had through Nairobi that came into play when I realized how it became an exciting learning environment for students. Even if we had to deal with basic skills, the way in which it was taught encouraged us to try and also improve our basic skills, our standard English use, and other things. So one of the things that Mary provided was what we call the Nairobi method. And the Nairobi method was used in a lot of activities at Nairobi. So not only were we taking classes, but we were doing things like participating in the summer teen program. We were learning how to not only learn, but also how to share that learning with young people. So one of the first activities, the first summer I was in the teen summer project, And it was exciting for me to teach middle schoolers who then taught toddlers how to read. And so it was a community effort to teach reading. And it was a summer where we were acting with both groups. So I was there teaching the middle schoolers and then working with them to teach the toddlers. And that was an exciting way to learn for everybody. I was amazed that the children, the middle schoolers, were actually very responsive and very proud of the work that they were doing with the toddlers. And they took ownership because they knew it was important for the toddlers, for them to know what they were teaching, okay? And so that was part of the method. So one of the things is having positive attitudes and high expectations. And so we expected a lot from those middle schoolers and from the toddlers as well. And so that was one of the things I saw, that in teaching, if you could give people pride in whatever they were doing, then they often performed at their highest level. Something else was, it was skills-oriented instruction. So the method that was used was very specific and made it easier for the youth to learn how to pronounce words from looking at it on the written page, how to look at the dictionary. We spent a lot of time on the dictionary in the class. So they were receiving very specific skills as part of it. In terms of the writing, we were using African-American culture, history, language, and politics in the curriculum to make it relevant to their experiences. And it also allowed them to speak about the things that were present in their environment specifically. Another part of the method had to do with a holistic approach based on African-American learning styles. So this was looking at the way in which language, how we had acquired language, and then what we needed to do to sort of change that a bit. So for example, teaching in group activities, using audience participatory games and activities to teach the skills, made it, again, more fun and exciting for the students, and allowed us to help them build up confidence in their ability to speak and write. The last part of it was the summer team project itself, developing youth with a caring commitment to the community. So having the youth do things in the community to support the community outside of class or during class or whatever we were doing became a significant part of everything we did at Nairobi. I remember days, for example, when Muhammad Ali came to Nairobi at the Nairobi Lounge, and all of the women cooked the food for the whole community. And it was an extraordinary event that I won't forget. And it was those kinds of things that gave pride and confidence and made us know that we were building up our community during a time when there was a lot of violence and so forth going on around us. So we were using self-determination to decide what would work best for our community in terms of improving the educational outcomes and improving the trajectory of our youth out of East Palo Alto and Belhaven, because a lot of my community also participated in the movement from Belhaven. And so so with that, I was able to actually, when I got to Foothill College, and I actually got into technology. And because of my experience with teaching in a lab environment and so forth, I was actually able to move up to actually teaching tech at Foothill. And I applied a lot of the same kinds of methodology to the teaching I did with computers. Because to me, in the beginning, it was just another language that you had to learn. And so I was able to do that at Foothill for about almost 20 years. And now I am teaching at Street Code Academy, which for me is like being back at Nairobi, because they are teaching tech to every member of the family, from a 4-year-old all the way up to a 90-year-old. And it has the same feel, it has the same kind of community as what we had during the Nairobi movement. So it still lives on in East Palo Alto through programs like Street Code Academy. And I am just extraordinarily happy to have this as my lived experience here in this area. And thank you.
Well, my experience with Nairobi College is a short one. My brother, when he was discharged from the Navy, he did his 4 years, and he came back to East Palo Alto, and he signed up. I was excited about us having a college in East Palo Alto. I went, wow, that's great. And my brother said, man, I'm going to East Palo Alto College. I said, go to a real college. I had to eat crow. My brother turned out to be a millionaire. Here I am. I went, oh my goodness, so much for my smart mouth. He excelled. And I look at the group here. Look what Nairobi College did for each and every one of you. Huh? Yeah. That's the living, I mean, this is living history on the screen. So that's it for me. I want the people to enjoy each and every one of you, because you have truly brought the history of our city to this.
So imagine a Wakanda. All of you have seen Black Panther. But imagine a Wakanda without all the technology. And that was Nairobi. It was like a Harlem Renaissance in East Palo Alto. The Nairobi movement was about self-determination and community control of every phase of community life. In health, in education, in social services, in criminal justice, in business, in culture, self-determination and community control. One of the aims of that movement was political control of local government. At the time, because of the activism that occurred in the community, the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors was forced, essentially, to create a municipal advisory body called the East Palo Alto Municipal Council, which advised the county on various affairs, all the governmental affairs. The political activists who are involved in the Nairobi movement understood that this was a token decision-making body, and that it was necessary for us to have self-determination and community control, and that can only happen if we became a city. And so the 1979 an incorporation committee was formed, and over that period between 1979 and 83, there were 2 elections. And the first election was shaped by the county to fail. One of the 5 ballot measures, all of which had to pass, and all of which passed within the boundaries of East Palo Alto, one of those 5 ballot measures to dissolve the Menlo Park Sanitation District allowed Menlo Park voters to vote. And they overwhelmingly opposed the dissolution of that district, and that vote defeated the first incorporation vote in East Palo Alto. And because of a regional outcry led by KCBS, then the county allowed us to vote again a year later, and there was only one measure on the ballot: should you become a city or not? And the city was born. at that time. But the opponents of incorporation filed a lawsuit in the California Superior Court. They took it to the California Supreme Court and then to the US Supreme Court. And along the way, what we discovered was that those of us who were involved in the leadership of the incorporation movement got investigated by the FBI, wiretapped by the FBI. And eventually, when the Supreme Court refused to hear the arguments to dissolve the city itself was born. And so East Palo Alto, the story that I'm telling you on the political front about the formation of the city, Martha has talked about on the educational front. Kalamu has talked about on the cultural front. Juanita has talked about on the educational front. Lewis, in terms of family and all of the dynamics and challenges that people experienced as a part of this effort, this initiative. And Bulin Layla has maybe the biggest story of all to tell because of the range of ways that he was involved and multiple contributions that he made as an activist, as a scholar, as a parent, as a community leader, and his legacy lives on.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks for the kudos, Omo. I should mention though that whole movement, I used to hear Omo talk about incorporation, and people should understand that he really was the leader of that. Just like Kwame Nkrumah was the leader for Ghana and Nigeria, he occupies that role, okay? And that's something I have always admired him for. Me, I'm going to just, first place, this was very moving to hear everybody talk. So I don't have to go into the things they already covered, especially even in my connection with Kalamu and art, because she's an artist and I'm an artist too. So I'm going to just briefly go over the things that I did get involved in and go from there. Now, I had pre-residence community experience with the Israel Harris, Onetta Harris family, and that they became my extended family, and the children looked at me as like their uncle, their almost another father. And so I planned to come to East Palo Alto when I graduated from college and start a school and a group to sing music, but with a message, a political message, rather than just the music. Typical Black music, but change the words. And I got here and they said, one's already started. Go talk to a guy named Bob Hoover. And that's when I found out about him. And so I talked with him and eventually became co-director of the Nairobi Messengers, of which Kalamu was just a little budding 17-year-old poet, as she remembers. And without going into all the details, there was probably 20-something kids. We actually toured the country, went to tour back east in several colleges, etc. Could talk forever about that. Then I did teach science and math at Nairobi High Schools and Ravenswood Elementary School District, even when Oma was there. And when me and my wife operated a homeschool called Nikosemo Emu, it means total learning, for some 15 to 20 years out of our home. Then me and my wife shared as chairman of the Nairobi Kwanzaa Committee, and we oversaw that for like 40 years. And we served as the persons who sent out the schedule for the whole Bay Area. And then we turned it over about 4 years over to Io Daly Kinchin, and she's doing a great job doing that now. Then, so those are the things we got involved in. For me, it was an avenue for me to do everything I thought I wanted to do. Some science and teaching, some teaching of history, etc. And it was here that I decided to write the books that I did write. The first one's called The Prehistoric European Origin of Racism, and his title was Cold Wind from the North. Martha has a copy, I think Omo does too. And then I was in a PhD program and I finished it, but I ran out of money, so I published my thesis as a book titled Cosmic Destiny, Prophetic Journey, and it's redating the unification of the most important development in history, historically, in the Nile Valley. And that can be bought on Amazon. And finally, I did just published a book recently called Who's the Greatest of All Time? It's about sports. And it's an attempt to try and make some money rather than just leave a legacy. So those are the things that I was involved in. And this community enabling me to do that. And I was also involved, I played I think a significant role in the placing of Warren Heyman as superintendent of schools. And I had to go into my activist act like that. And some people were very surprised because they viewed me as a sort of a quiet guru before that. But Norma Wiley knows all about that. So these are the things that Nairobi was for me. And I set roots here because I've always been fundamentally interested in extended family. And the most amazing development to me, one of the unique ones, was how much everybody's children looked at us like their parents. And I remember Bob Hoover's child was here one time and they were talking about the past, and she said, well, Baba Vulele, you all raised us. And I just looked at her, and there was a young man of modern times standing here, and he said, what do you mean? And she said, oh, everybody, we looked about everybody as our parents. We were really extended family, and we didn't plan it that way, but it turned out that way. And so that young man said, boy, there's nothing like that happening now. So I guess he meant in his arena, he would like to have that. But the Nairobi was all the things you've all said about it, but to me, it was a place where I could express everything I wanted to express in the service of community development rather than just simply radical politics. And I'll never forget it. I'm here and I'm here forever. Oh, pardon me. I should mention also that the other cultural things were, no, I'll mention that later. Okay, I'm through.
Thank you all. I would just like to say that the Nairobi spirit lives on. My two daughters attended Nairobi Day School, and Makita and Tangi Murray, and they're out there just continuing with the legacy of Nairobi. And I think all of the students, staff, and our descendants are still continuing to put forth that Nairobi spirit. So my last question to the panelists is, what do you think the public should know about that Nairobi spirit, your legacy?
Wow, you know, it's true that we were really a village here, and we still are a village, and we still keep making things happen, no matter how things come at us to make us act differently. You know, we still rise. I enjoyed being in a place and a space where all children are loved and honored and taken well care of. My Hadia, hi Hadia, this is Miami talking about you. My Hadia was able to go to a Black college, Park Atlanta University, and then she graduated and was all into the tech world, and eventually she got tired of that because of the way they were acting towards her. So she went on and decided to strike out and form her own business. So she's an esthetician and has that business full-time operating now. And I'm so proud of her, and the whole family is so proud that she's done that. So what I'd like the public to know about the Nairobi movement is that you have to build what you want to see in the world, and that it will help to inspire people to rise higher in life. And you must stay the course and keep learning to grow. And you must leave a legacy that others can emulate, be proud of, and know what can be done with boldness, love, and confidence for the sake of the ancestors, those who are being born, and those who are yet to be born. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. Nairobi forever.
Okay, for me, I would say that the Nairobi movement allowed me to look at education in a non-traditional way. And it allowed me to come up with strategies, learning strategies that I could use with students of all different backgrounds and languages even at times. because it was more student-centered in its focus. It was more getting the students to look at learning through their cultural lens, whatever that culture might be. And it also provided a strategy for dealing with an educational system that was focused on one type or two types of learners, as opposed to all the different types of learners that there are in society. And so by having that, being able to be creative in that way with education and creating activities and exercises, and even the way in which we taught language was, and sort of determining for ourselves what actually worked and using it was the one thing I liked about the Nairobi model. So we weren't stuck on one thing. We applied different strategies to help improve the learning of our community, whether it be around the academics or around city building or building pride. So for me, it provides a way to look at society as a whole from the perspective of having our own voices that we can present. So for me, my children came after my Nairobi experience, but because I talked about it all the time and talked about it in relationship to things that they were seeing and so forth, they understand and recognize it as something that they also acquired over time, just from me sharing with them my experiences and how I applied it to teaching. So yes, thank you.
My experience with the Nairobi movement started way back. I remember pretty much with the election for us becoming a city, and like Omar Wally said, the first election was defeated, but we kept the faith. We wound up, we became a city. Once again, at one point, we was named the murder capital of our country. And guess what? We overcame that because I was in the movement with Down with Dope, Up with Hope. We went and stood with the guardian angels and all the hot spots that was here, supposed to be the hot spots here in East Palo Alto. Look at our city today, huh? And once again, to prove, I don't want the people in the San Francisco Archdiocese know that we here in East Palo Alto got something going. I was the first, and I'm still the only Black ordained deacon in the San Mateo County from the San Francisco Archdiocese. I'm the only one. Guess what? This is to show them that, guess what? The Nairobi movement is still moving, and we'll move on. And we're going to take, and we're working on keeping this city that people won't be forced out, but be able to stay here and live here. That's part of our movement. And guess what? We're going to overcome and achieve that movement. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to just say three things. One, Nairobi wasn't just local, it really was national and international. In 1973, there was a convening of the Black Power convening called in Gary, Indiana by Richard Hatcher, who was the first Black mayor, co-sponsored by Charles Diggs, who was the mayor of Detroit, and Amamu Baraka, who was an icon, poet and activist based in Newark. And when they wrote the proceedings or the story, the record of that national convening, in the very first paragraph, it says, from New York to Los Angeles, from Atlanta to East Palo Alto. And so people have talked about East Palo Alto and the fact that there was a spotlight on us. But you know, Muhammad Ali, Coretta Scott King, Jesse Jackson, I mean, you name the national political icon, they came through East Palo Alto to learn our story, to support our work, to contribute to our lives. So that's one piece of our Wakanda. The second piece I just would like to talk about, you know, how it benefited me. So what I learned and how I grew and developed personally during that era allowed me to become a nonprofit management consultant who went into communities beginning in 1983, not as an expert or a know-it-all as a consultant, but who went in communities as a listener, as an enabler, as a supporter, as an ambassador, as a nurturer. And as a result of training hundreds of people all over the country, visiting probably 150 or more cities, working with local community organizations, but with the microphone that said community first, the community voice ought to drive the way that consultants work in communities. What I learned in Nairobi helped me become a part of a group of people that changed the nonprofit management industry. Nobody goes into a Black community or community of color as a consultant with an attitude or an agenda. They all today show up as listeners. And there's no community that will let a consultant come in and tell them what to do. That is my legacy in part in the profession that I'm in, that flows from my experience and my love for the Nairobi movement. And then lastly, the best, this is about the future. People say, well, how do we, you know, make things happen, or what should we be doing with young people in the future? So the best way to learn a language is, they call it total immersion. So you go live with a family, you don't speak English, all you speak is that language, you live the culture, you learn the culture, and in probably a couple months, you become pretty fluent at that language. So think about Nairobi as a total immersion experience for Black kids, where education, culture, recreation, as Bula Layla said, we were all the adults were parents to the young people. That we're 24/7, the kids of Nairobi, the youth of Nairobi were in this space that we created, our Wakanda, and all of them grew up right, all of them. And they're making a difference all over the world. And so if we want to build a future for our people, for our communities, let's create our own Wakandas, our own Nairobis in our communities, and the world will change.
Very good, Omo. And everybody. Can you hear me? I just like to list the things I think they should know about the accomplishments. You've all done a very good job of expressing the spirit of everything. But the public should know about the accomplishments resulting from Black activism, which includes the following: forming a city from an unincorporated area, the institutional developments mentioned above, Kwame Ture's mentorship of East Palo Alto. Yeah, he was like our father. The role of Black East Palo Alto in Bay Area Black radicalism. At one time, we were considered a major center of such radicalism for this country by the establishment. The attempts to rename the city, we almost did it, but they undermined it. The cultural artistic developments mentioned, Kalamu mentioned much of that, and she was part of that, but also Fuare Congo, Kwanzaa, the Nairobi Festival, which was a major accomplishment, and the relationship of Nairobi to similar efforts all over the country. those are the things they should know, and the effect that individuals had outside of this community. For me, it would be my participation in the in various organizations, but at San Francisco State University, Black Studies, I was there from the beginning, was a part of that, but I was anchored here, okay? And everybody there knew that and respected me because I came from this community. And so these are the things they should know. And if we didn't tell our story, what we would see down the line would be a story that said, oh, everybody contributed to everything, and it was a total multicultural effort, everything, and it would water down our achievements. So the fact that the Archives Project is here to prevent that, and others, says we will tell our story, but our story constructed by us, not by someone else. And this is our contribution. And it's amazing to me that this group has got together at our older years. We're still here, and we started something new, and we're going to make a better contribution. And thank you all for allowing me to participate.
I make many thanks to all of our panelists, and I would just like it noted that all 50 plus years of my teaching career has been in East Palo Alto. I'm proud of that.
Right.
Oh, I should mention, Kalama's daughter went to our school.
And she came to your school being a grade ahead, and she left your school being a grade ahead.
Yeah, when my daughters left Nairobi and went to St. Raymond's, they were both skipped a year in school at Nairobi.
And my wife's prize student graduated from college with degrees in physics and mathematics and chemistry, and she graduated at the age of 16 from high school. So.
Wow.
She got skills.
All of you are so incredibly impressive. It's I sort of feel like I need a moment to breathe and meditate into what I have actually been laid witness to and what you blessed us with. I think the thing that comes to mind, to be honest, the emotion that I have is about the love and the power of the experiences between all of you is just truly beautiful to witness right now here. And then to think about how, you know, it must have felt for you all to have been in that space building this community together that just never had been before. How powerful that must have been, and the concepts of, you know, centering self-determination and true community building, where so many in the community are all raising the children and taking responsibility across issues and arts and culture and community. And it's really beautiful, and I truly appreciate it. This is our Q&A portion, and so in the audience and those that have been listening, I know first you all should know you're getting a lot of love, a lot of people sharing how motivational this has been for them, and thanking you all for your amazing contributions, how they're loving this. Thanking all of you, lots of claps, lots of just appreciation for all that you're sharing and how informative everything is. Lots of caps with wows, and you know, my elders, thank you all for sharing your stories with us. Your legacy lives on. I mean, I do hope that you are all feeling that love, even though we're in this virtual space right now. As far as the questions go, we've got a few questions from the audience that have come in. I'm going to just answer the first question that Heather put in from the very beginning, which is, so when it said Nairobi, California, is that East Palo Alto? And the answer is yes to that question. And so before we go to some of the additional questions that have come up from the audience, we had just wanted to raise a question about how you think the Nairobi movement has really influenced and informed later activism, maybe today's activism.
You're on mute, Boo, Layla.
quite a bit. As I said, Omo was a friend of mine said when I knew that Omo was going to end up doing this kind of leadership. He says, why? I said, because he has what's necessary. He says, why not you? I said, because that's not my role. Okay. But he's had an extraordinary influence outside of here on other movements. Not the kind that makes you famous, but the kind that makes you famous internally. Okay. And Kwame Nkrumah used to come, not Kwame Nkrumah, Kwame Ture used to come here and talk to people here. And he had an influence on our direction. We had an influence on him. Most people do not know that. As I talked about my experiences outside, but almost had that, Martha's had that, and I can point to a lot of other people. Most of the people in the country knew about Bob and Mary Hoover and all sorts of other persons. The campaign to put Warren Heyman as the superintendent of schools was known all over the country. And some people came from other places here because of what they heard that was going on here. Independent school movement, that was unheard of, especially considering this city is about what, 2 or 3 square miles, less than 20, 30,000 people, yet our influence was worldwide. And remember, we were sister cities to Nairobi. That's why we wanted to call ourselves Nairobi. So when you see your stuff and people mention names of people from here in other areas, for example, Mary Hoover's book is being sold. Is that, I think Juanita said it's still being sold on the internet. And we could go on and on and on. Then we went to the 6th Pan-African Congress, and there were several delegates from here that went to that Congress and spoke to a worldwide audience. This is people from all over the world. And we played a major role in that conference. And later on, there was Festac, when people from here, artists, went there and performed. So it goes on and on and on. And some of it you'll never really know. Isn't it amazing that people could look at our struggle for independence in the same way that Ghana and Mozambique and Zimbabwe and all of those places, and they would come here wanting to know our opinions, etc. And all of the people that contributed that will never be famous, but we know who they were. So our influence goes beyond where we are. And perhaps that's been the motivating factor for you all to come together and for us to come together and pull this together. Now, Bob Hoover should get credit for much of that, because if we all look to one person who, when he said, come, everybody showed up. I don't care what their ideologies were, their differences were, they came. And we're here because of him. And we're here because of Mary too. And by the way, the reason I got back to teach at San Francisco State later on in my life, because Mary Hoover was there. She's the one that talked him in to letting me come back and teach again. So our influence is everywhere. We don't want to exaggerate. We don't underestimate it. And it will continue. The Nairobi advocates that we're together with now, with our wonderful leader, Martha. I'd give her a hand. And our technician, Juanita, give her a hand. And Lewis, like he said, he's a pioneer, isn't he? Right? The only, what he said, Deacon. We know about Omo, etc. I made a few things. And Klamu, and I hope one day Klamu will have a poetry book that thick, because that's what she needs to do. But it was through her and others that I recorded, because people used to ask me, why didn't you record being the musician you might have been, Pharoah Saunders' mentor and all of that? And I just said I never got around to it. And if they hadn't done that, I would have never put anything on tape. And by the way, there is Rudy Wangozi's CD out and has her and us on it. So to bring a close to it, we had a tremendous influence, all out of proportion to our size. This little bitty community comes from worldwide. And it even inspired people in Africa. That's another story. So we should be proud of what we've done. We should be proud of telling our story. And let's culminate it, I hope, with a movie that we make, that will have more than our just words. It'll have things from the past, and the technology's here to do that. And that's what I want to see God willing, that I'll still be here enough to see it.
Layla, the other thing that happened here was that we, in our studies, we did discover that we are very much tied to Africa. Our way of being, our way of knowing was very, very, very close, very, very close. I mean, we're growing up in an environment where we forget about the segregation between the generations. That's non-existent here. You know, forget about talking about ageism. That's not going to happen here. You know, I never will forget one time, Sister Lily McDonald, she's now an ancestor. She invited me over to her house one day. I go over, we're, you know, having a nice meal together and we're talking and stuff. And she says to me, you know, it's something I want to tell you. And I said, oh, okay. What is it? And she said, I just want you to know how very proud I was that you were my teacher. She took an English class. She thought the world of someone much younger than her teaching her English. And here I am looking at her and somebody could teach me a lot of stuff, especially about how to live life and all. And that's the kind of environment we grew up with. I mean, to me, to this day, I'm almost floored when I hear about the ages of people. Because when we were growing up, that was not a thing we're gonna ever talk about. Because how you gonna talk about age and then get work done? You got to get work done. That's the most important thing to pay attention to. So as a result, you ain't gonna really know nobody's age until they're dead. Because you know, it's not something that we put a lot of emphasis on when you're out here trying to get work done. We got work to do, so we don't have time to be paying attention to those kind of things.
Right. We have a question, and I think maybe this was for Juanita. Heather was wondering where we can get more information on the learning strategies used to teach diverse student populations.
Well, the information I was providing actually came from a download I received of something Mary Hoover wrote in the Journal of, oh, let me go back and get that. I forgot. It was the last thing. Let's see. It was, this particular one was called the Nairobi Day School and African American Independent School by Mary Hoover. And it was in the Journal of Negro Education. So I have been looking for different articles. It's hard to find because much of it is stored in a place called JSTOR. And so there is quite a bit of information out there, but you really do have to look for it in what I would call private collection kind of thing. So I do have some of that information, Heather, and if you want to find out more, you can email me at the advocates@nairobiepa.org.
Is it nairobiadvocates.epa.org or just Nairobi Advocates EPA?
EPA, Nairobi, it's advocates@nairobiepa.org.
Okay, I'm gonna get this.
Yeah, they'll see it on the last slide, yeah.
Okay.
Some people have been putting into the chat some websites.
Okay, good, because please ignore the last one I wrote in. I did not write that email correctly.
Okay, and I see Lakiba put in the JSTOR URL. And okay. So thank you, Lakiba.
Perfect. I was going to say there's a lot of, you all have referenced some books that you've written, books that have inspired you or were written by other people, your contemporaries at the time, about their contributions and all of your contributions. Please feel free to share those in the chat with others. CDs too were mentioned. Anything you would like people to be aware of, please do add them. Now, I as we're waiting for maybe some more audience questions, you've answered a lot because people are mostly just very inspired and want to share what great fans they are. I was wondering, I was thinking about just at the beginning, is there one or two incidences that you could point to that sparked what you would call this Nairobi movement? Or would you say there were movements across lots of systems that then collectively came together to be the Nairobi movement?
Well, there's a story that Bob Hoover mentions when the parents were getting together because their kids weren't getting educated in the high schools, and they were trying to decide how to go about starting something. And Stokely Carmichael was at that meeting, and he says, why don't you just start your own school? And that's how the Nairobi eventually, came about, where he just says, why don't you start your own school?
So I can add, the context in which that happened was as the first Black people moved in East Palo Alto in the early 1950s. A decade later, by the mid-1960s, we were a predominantly Black community. Internationally, there was a Pan-African movement. Nationally, there was a civil rights movement and also the Black Power movement. And that took in East Palo Alto the form of the Nairobi movement. So early in the 1960s, and Bob was central to Bob Hoover, the work, a group started meeting on a regular basis, and they called themselves the Floating Crap Gang because they met at different houses of the members. And it was that group that then spearheaded the community control effort in every phase of community life. Some of which we've touched on today. So I think that the genesis of it all was the Floating Crap Gang.
Now that could be the name of that movie. Devil Umbrella. Beautiful. Anyone else want to add to that? It seems like there was this core that got together and really thought about these across systems.
Well, one of the aspects of the Nairobi College came about due to issues at the College of San Mateo. And the students, many of the African-American students from East Palo Alto and Belhaven were attending that school, and Bob was the college readiness director. And he had, the students had come together around that particular program and were becoming activists on campus and so forth. And then the college decided that they didn't want that. They didn't want the activism. They didn't want students of color, voicing, sharing their voices. So they forced Bob out of CSM. And when he left, the Black students and students of other colors also went with him and made the decision. That was also part of the decision to form the school, that the students from the community college wanted to follow Bob and start a school of their own because of the frustrations that we've had traditionally in the school systems. And so that was also part of the motivation of it as well, that a lot of our young people here wanted to get out of the regular school system. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad you pointed that out, because there were three. It was what Martha talked about in the Floating Crap Game and what happened at that college. And that was a cataclysmic event. It wasn't mild. Okay, somebody actually reached over the desk and punched the.
Yeah, they had a riot. It was during the period of time when
it was
riots.
a confrontation. And so the students, according to Bob, said, well, if we can't go there, let's start our own school. So there was different streams coming into it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's what led to pretty much everything. By the way, I should mention, when I was at San Jose State and working over here with the Harris family, we considered East Menlo Park as also in East Palo Alto the same. So we didn't differentiate because that was the Black community of each of those two cities.
Right.
So that's what the mentality was. And it was a great time, just like the Black Revolution of the 60s was an extraordinary and great time, and the story is still be told.
Right.
Well, I feel like I know maybe the audience has run out of questions. I have a million, but I know our time is winding down. So maybe I'll just really thank each of you for really enlightening us about this really important local Black history that is truly part of the woven national and international Black history that we should all be aware of. And you've really inspired us with your leadership and your heart. And collectively, your power and legacy is palpable. I can feel it across the screen. And I think it's just a great reminder that when people full of heart and commitment and hard work come together and set their minds, that really powerful things can happen. And all of you are an amazing testament to that. And I hope that we're able to continue some of that work forward, and that you will help guide us on that path forward.
Thank you so much for that, Shireen. And
Mm.
while we're at it on this topic, I want to, I always like to do a call to action for people, because it's one thing to learn about things, then it's another thing to how is this going to help you be free? Or what can you do to step up things more in your community and things of that nature? So right now, with us having focus on the East Palo Alto Community Archive, I'm calling for people to write poetry on the Nairobi experience, Nairobi College, and East Palo Alto. And anyone on this call that hears this, if you're interested in sending me short pieces, I'm not looking for epic poetry, I can't do that. Short pieces, you just send that to me at poetsarerising@gmail.com. poetsarerising@gmail.com.
I'm putting that in the chat here. And R is not just the letter R, correct? It's ARE.
There you go. That's good.
Okay, great. Okay, you have that now. Also, everyone should have that in their chat. I want to just take a moment and read back a few things. I couldn't help when the question came up around when Martha was asking about the legacy. I just wanted you all to hear back some of the words you mentioned. You talked about having power to build what you want to see in the world, to inspire people for the sake of the ancestors and those who are being born today. That it allowed you to be creative and determining for ourselves what actually worked and having our own voices. We kept the place. We became a city. The Nairobi Movement's still moving, keeping people to stay. We will overcome to achieve that movement. Nairobi was not just local, but national and international. All the Black icons came to EPA as a microphone that community first. Nairobi is a total cultural immersion. Let's create our own Wakanda, our own Nairobis, a radical center for Black activism, our story constructed by us and not someone else. It just gives me goosebumps, and I just wanted to make sure we land and you all heard that back from yourselves. I know you're just flying from the hip here. Before I turn it over to Sharifa, I do want to just specifically thank Juan Fu, who from County Library, who's working really hard behind the scenes to create all this magic of spotlighting and making sure that you can hear us, and helped, I think, every single one of us navigate some technical issues, and just want to deeply appreciate that. It's a lot of hard work. And thanks to all of you who came tonight, and we would really appreciate if we could hear about your thoughts for the program. Nicole placed the URL where you can rate this event at smcl.org/rate this event. And if you missed any of our Spring Equity Author Talk series, You can view it, past programs on the San Mateo County Library YouTube channel. This will also live on that channel. So I hope that you go there, you listen to it yourself, but also to share it, because most of our viewership comes from those who watch the videos. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sharifa Wilson to close us out before we show the slide deck one last time. Thank you, everyone, again, and deep appreciation.
Thank you. That was very inspiring, and I think that and it's just one of the examples of what we plan to include in the East Palo Alto Community Archive. So we'd like to extend an invitation to you to join us. If you have a story that you want to share your experience of your family, yourselves, growing up here, working here, and engaging with people in the community, we welcome that story at the East Palo Alto Community Archive. We're actually piloting a self-archiving project where we're allowing groups and families and clubs and churches and organizations to record their own story in their own voice. And so again, much like the Nairobi Movement, we are about making sure that our voices are heard and lifted up. And we want you to be involved in that. So again, we really want you to contact the East Palo Alto Community Archive and join us in an effort to maintain and share the history, the very rich history of the East Palo Alto community. Thank you.
Lift every voice and sing to earth, heaven, ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies resound the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. March on till victory is won. Stoning the road we trod to the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn has died, yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place from which our fathers died. We have come over a way that with tears have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughter, out from the gloomy past till now.